Welcome everyone to today's program on urban Maine and the COVID-19 responses from the front line. My name is Kelly Hummerkhauser. I'm the manager of education here at the National Main Street Center. And before we get started with today's program, I want to introduce all of our panelists, who we'll get more into their details as they present. But today we have with us Dionne Baux, Director of the UrbanMain program, Anwar Salim, the Executive Director of H Street in Washington, D.C., Amanda Elliott, the Senior Program Officer and Director of California Programs at the National Main Street Center, and Carolyn C.J. Johnson of the East Oakland Black Cultural Zone. And before we start today's program, I want to remind everyone about the audio features on our platform here. You are automatically dialed into a listen-only mode and you are muted, but you can change the audio functionality from the phone to computer or vice versa by clicking the audio panel on your screen. There you can just choose which option. You can also type us questions at any time. Staff will respond to questions and read those questions out loud to our presenters. We'll do most of our Q&A towards the end of the program, but please feel free to type in your question whenever it comes to you. And if we're not able to address all questions today, feel free to email us. The general inbox for Main Street is mainstreet@savingplaces.org, but we'll also share more information about how to be in contact with UrbanMain specifically, as we want to make sure that your question is addressed appropriately. Just before we kick off today, I want to remind everybody of the resources from Main Street America. If you go to mainstreet.org/COVID-19 resources, you will see a kind of a full listing of different federal and national resources, webinars, funding programs, how to support local safely, and social media graphics you could share. So just encourage you to keep abreast of those changes that are occurring on the page. And those will also move from immediate response into recovery. And so you can stick with us as we continue to provide resources throughout this crisis. And now I will turn it over to our Director of UrbanMain, Dionne Baux. Dionne.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. And thanks, folks, for, spending an hour with us today. We're so glad that you're here with us. Again, I can't emphasize the importance of checking in on the National Main Street Center's COVID-19 resource page. We're constantly updating that. So we are definitely here for you, and we're trying to make certain that you have the resources that you need. Look, we're about 6 to 8 weeks into COVID-19. I can't remember how long I've been home, but it seems like a very long time now. We started out with really just responding with, letting you know how can you still support your local businesses in a safe way. Then from there, we really wanted to check in on you as an organization and as Main Street managers, as you're thinking about your budgets, as you're thinking about changing your budgets, thinking about events. Many events have been canceled this year. So how are you shifting? And our colleagues shared more information. And then we transitioned over to leading through crises. How are you leading through this crisis right now? Next slide, I'm sorry. How are you leading through crises? Are you responding? Are you stabilizing? Are you really starting to think about the different phases that you have to move in now with this COVID-19 pandemic? And from there, we also shared our small business research study that our colleagues shared with you, which seemed to be a very valuable study that many of our Main Streets have been utilizing. They're using it for advocacy purposes, et cetera, to really understand what do the local businesses need. And again, that is because of your relationships and your deep connections with those businesses that they participated in this survey. So thank you very much. Next slide. The news reports never make things easy for us. And so we know our minority and immigrant businesses, we're already behind the curve. Many of them are unbankable or don't have relationships with banking institutions right now. They don't have access to capital. So as this pandemic hit, there's just been numerous news studies from San Diego to DC talking about how our minority and immigrant businesses are constantly struggling through COVID-19. Next slide. Here's another example of just in DC, how are these businesses going to respond and rebound from this pandemic? Again, just really understanding how important your roles are to working in these communities, communities of color, minority businesses, African-American-led businesses, Hispanic-led businesses. These businesses are going to require your direct attention and focus on how are you able to develop programs and support systems that will support their unique situations. Next slide. So from there, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how are our big city coordinating programs responding to just the, working with minority and immigrant businesses in their neighborhood commercial districts and working with all of their businesses that are suffering right now through COVID-19. I'll start with Boston Main Street. Next slide. And Boston Main Street really has taken the effort to ensure that they are responding immediately to their districts as well as to their businesses that they're serving. The Boston Main Street program, they have 20 Main Streets. The Main Street program is really gathering the federal, national, city, and state resources, and then in turn, turning that over to those Main Street managers to make sure that they can amplify the education and the awareness to the small businesses that they have these trusted relationships with already. So they're really pushing out this information very quickly to make certain that they are trying to give information to their businesses and ensure that they have everything that they need. If we flip to the next slide, there is a slide that talks about the small business relief supports. So from Boston Main Street has the benefit of having the Boston Foundation. And as a part of the Boston Main Street Foundation, they were able to raise $200,000 immediately to place grants into the hands of these Main Street businesses to the tune of about $1,000. They also had a partnership with a grassroots crowdfunding platform called Patronicity. And from there, they're able to really raise funds in a very quick way to ensure that these businesses are receiving support. They're also at the Department of Economic Development, which houses the Boston Main Street program. There's a $2 million fund that was created also to ensure that they're providing additional support to these small businesses in Main Street corridors. The grants are ranging anywhere from $1,000, $2,500, $5,000 to $10,000 based on the size, the need of that particular business, as well as ensuring that that business has a Boston address. Next slide. Here we'll share a little bit about Baltimore Main Street. Baltimore Main Street, Mayor Jack Young recently released a $5.5 million fund that will be administered by the Baltimore Development Corporation in the following manner. They will provide $500,000 immediately to manufacturing and procurement policies to groups that are providing personal protective equipment. As an expansion of BDC and Made in Baltimore's program, this initial grant program will be allocated to ensure that they're providing grants to those Baltimore makers and manufacturers who immediately are producing PPE equipment for the city to purchase, as well as for these manufacturers to provide PPE equipment to their first responders. Neighborhood business reopening initiative. BDC will also oversee this effort to develop and implement designs to reconfigure public right-of-way, as well as public spaces to maximize outdoor seating and other trends to provide ways to create more social distancing in the main streets and retail business license districts, as well as other commercial districts throughout Baltimore. This $1.5 million program may also include the use of parklets, public information graphics and signage and design elements to ensure that as businesses are reopening, they're ensuring that they're considering the public health and best practices. In addition to that, finally, there is an additional $3.5 million that has been allocated as a part of this fund directly to small business enterprises in certain commercial areas. These businesses may apply for up to $15,000 in grants for expenses such as rent, payroll, and purchase of PPE for their workers, PPE equipment for their workers that may be necessary as they plan to reopen. And a portion of this fund will be set aside for businesses which have been unable to qualify for federal aid that has been made available to our small businesses. So I think this is a really good way that the cities are definitely responding very quickly to their constituencies. Next slide, please. In the city of Chicago, the Chicago Community Trust, United Way of Metro Chicago, announced that they established the Chicago Community COVID-19 Response Fund in partnership with the city of Chicago. This $100 million program is to ensure that this fund is providing flexible resources to local nonprofit organizations across the metropolitan area to support essential resources to the individuals and households that are most impacted by this epidemic. And are also ensuring that they're making certain that these organizations have the support that they need to be there to be able to respond directly to the businesses and the residents that they're serving. Next slide. The city of Chicago also has empowered many of their neighborhood business development centers to really serve as these virtual providers of services to their small businesses. Many of our organizations have had to shift very quickly to make certain that they're still being responsive to the businesses that are open. Many of our businesses are open right now, but they need guidance on how to, move to the next stage. And these neighborhood business development centers were quickly activated to serve in this role, to really work with the small businesses. And the city of Chicago provided an additional funding to these particular neighborhood business development centers who have, again, the trust and connections to the local businesses that they serve. So I'll shift there, next slide, to really speak a little bit about the frontline organizations that are managing impact. So again, we started with response. The city coordinating programs, has immediately responded. I think I may have missed DC, I'm sorry. The District of Columbia also has a really robust program where they shifted many of their existing grant programs to ensure that the Main Street managers could immediately use technical assistance grants that they receive, facade renovation grants that they receive to shift those to support the small businesses that they're serving. And they did that in a very quick way. Now we'll talk about those businesses on the front line. I apologize, guys. I'm not looking at the same PowerPoint that you're looking at, and I'm just trying to make certain that I am providing you the proper resources. The first community that I'll mention is a community out of Baltimore. This is the Federal Hill Main Street. So this is a partnership with the Light Street Church. They undertook a COVID-19 project called the Common Table. And the Common Table was essentially to solicit tax donations, deductible donations that would be used to pay their local restaurants to prepare and deliver free individually packaged meals to South Baltimore's first responders, but as well as their vulnerable seniors. This was a really great way for this Main Street to say thank you to Baltimore City's brave and hardworking first responders as they're putting themselves at risk to keep our community safe. It has been an opportunity to also support their local restaurant staff during this pandemic. They've had a great response to date, and they are thrilled with the number of people that are coming in to fill their virtual table with delicious, freshly prepared donated meals. Next slide. This slide is featuring how some of our communities have immediately shifted to virtual galleries or virtual type of events. So, this is Highlandtown Main Street, also in Baltimore. What they hosted was a virtual arts walk. Highland Main Street prides itself as an arts and entertainment district, and they have several places, several galleries and businesses and artists that rely on the monthly Highlandtown First Friday Art Walk. So what they did was once, the COVID-19 hit, they immediately shifted to host their first virtual, art walk on April 3rd from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., mostly through Facebook Live. This event really ensured that they were able to highlight and showcase the number of galleries that they have in the district. They said that they were able to, the first event included over 1,500 online views with 300 direct interactions with the community through comments. Several artists were also able to sell small works of art and receive commission inquiries. Highlandtown Main Street Committee plans to continue to host their first Friday art walk virtually for the foreseeable future. As you also note that they have a map of different businesses that were open and that were allowing, curbside pickup during this event. So again, it was a good way to highlight the galleries, but also highlight many of the businesses that are still open, providing delivery services, curbside pickup for many individuals that still remain engaged. Next slide. This is a community in Chicago, and I know this question comes up often. How are special service areas and business improvement districts responding to this crisis? How are they changing their budget? How are they working with their commissioners to do this? South Shore Chamber of Commerce, a Chicago UrbanMain community, and administrator of a special service area, known to many as a business improvement district, really met with their commissioners very quickly at the onset of COVID-19 to develop new programs that their SSA could implement. It would not be a big festival this year. Essentially, all of Chicago's summer festivals have been canceled. But how could they continue to help the small businesses that they're serving? So they are in the process of developing a TIDE grant program, and they will choose up to 10 eligible businesses to directly receive a $5,000 grant from them. They want to really assist their businesses to update their operations from development of an online presence to explore growth models, as well as a marketing campaign. In addition to that, they are also, much like Phil's Federal Hill Main Street, they're also contracting with restaurants for meals. So they're contracting with local restaurants to prepare meals for first responders and medical personnel. And we're really, again, just trying to keep many of their businesses going right now, but as well as serving a need to our first responders. Next slide. This is an example of a large business improvement district, in fact, in the Central Business District in Memphis. And they really, they weren't used to being, the Downtown Memphis Commission was not used to being a grantor of programs. They utilized their bid to ensure that, they were providing marketing services and beautification services. But again, many of us have had to adapt in a very quick way to respond. So what they've recently developed is a downtown business forgivable loan fund, The loan offers up to $20,000, which are forgiven if the business remains open for 2 years. The funds are very flexible and can be used for operational expenses, rent, fixed assets, and debt restructuring. Again, just being adaptive and responding to the needs of the businesses that they're serving. Next slide. This is an example of Glover Park Main Street. So we're back in DC. Whatever the need, Glover Park Main Street has really begun to act as a jack of all trades. They're continually expanding outreach to anyone interested or in need. They have asked and really answered a lot of tough questions from their businesses, parsed through legislation for business owners who were worried about their employees, that have helped, and they've helped fill out grant and loan applications. They have arranged television media coverage for the Main Street and their businesses. They've really helped, they've helped an escape room business go virtual, a fitness studio move online. Again, they're serving as that jack of all trades, and they had grant dollars that they completely shifted to ensure that these grant dollars were responding to the needs of the businesses that they were serving in the Glover Park Main Street area. Next slide. This is the Parks Main Street, also in the District of Columbia, and they serve 2 business districts. So based on managing two business districts that are not very closely aligned to each other, close in proximity to each other, despite the fact many of their businesses have officially closed, but their assistance again has gone on and beyond to provide assistance to many of their businesses. For example, the Davis Center, with thanks to the Parks Main Street Help, is now able to offer virtual dance classes online. Peaches Kitchens in the Manor Park district, who they've helped them set up an online ordering and delivery platform. Cultural Coffee, which is on the Riggs Main Street. They've brought in guest chefs, live music, and coordinated meal pickup options. So again, they've just really adapted to fit the needs of the local businesses that they're serving. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. It is my pleasure to introduce Anwar Salim, founder of the 8th Street Main Street in 2002. Until he was tapped to charge the delivery of commercial revitalization and business retention services for the organization as the executive director in 2007. He's a native Washingtonian. Mr. Salim grew up in a surrounding neighborhood and remembered the commercial districts in its heyday. Under his leadership, 8th Street Main Street has developed 3,600 new jobs, has attracted more than 300 new businesses, and has leveraged over $6.5 billion in additional investment and development in the community. He has strong alliances with DC government officials who has really helped bring substantial resources to 8th Street. And he's a friend and ally of the National Main Street Center. He's participated in leadership opportunities to share his experience and growth with his fellow peers. When asked to share information, he's always been willing to do that with newer Main Streets that were coming into the fold, really understanding how to implement this Main Street program in an urban context. He has lended his time to reimagine the National Main Street Center's 4-point approach as part of the Refresh Task Force, and just as an overall pleasant colleague to work with. Anwar, please take it away.
Thank you, Dionne. You've done a great job. And, it's so funny. I was in South Korea when when this thing first broke out. And I noticed how South Korea changed and closed the borders early and began to take the temperatures of people in malls and conferences and all. I was in a conference, the peace conference, the Global Peace Conference in Korea. And they began to take people's temperatures. During that time, if anyone had a temperature, they would pull them out and take them to the makeshift hospitals they had at the time. So they really had a really advanced knowledge and treatment on how to treat COVID-19. And I was able to bring that back to Washington, D.C. and let our colleagues know that this was coming here. We live in a global society now. And if anyone is traveling throughout the world, we have so many hubs in the United States that was coming back here. And I knew it was. And by us being in Washington, D.C., and in New York, Chicago, and California, we are almost ground zero for such a virus to enter this country. And so we began to warn our city officials and all that this was coming, and that we knew that that COVID-19 would change the landscape of Main Street America, and matter of fact, the world forever. And we have to really get ready for the new norm. And so we began to reach out in early March to our city council members and let them know that this was coming, and eventually we're going to have to close down to really contain this virus. And some of them thought I was crazy. Some of them thought that it was a good idea. Some of them thought we were on point. But the bottom line is, no one is spared from the challenges that are facing us. Now more than ever, we must be concerned about people over profits. It must be that we have to protect the people who are burdened the most, and who really help keep this country flowing and are the front line. And that's our small businesses and our smaller employers. So we have to find a way to protect them. They really employ about 70 to 80% of the workforce of this country and pay the majority of the taxes. And so they are the front line, and we have to protect our small businesses first. It should be basically health and safety issues that we have to really focus on and protect those who we really in love with, and those are our children, our family, and our friends. So we have to keep fighting. It's very important for us to keep fighting. Can you move the slide, please? Okay. So we have to keep fighting. If you notice that most of our landscape and commercial districts are really vacant. Slide, please. We have to find a way to reactivate them again. Slide. Next. Keep moving. Okay, we began to really outreach, provide outreach services to our businesses at an early stage. We knew that many of them sooner or later would close. And at the same time, as I mentioned before, we had to begin to talk to our government agencies, the city council and all, about creating legislation that would move things forward. Next, please. Next, please. We also began to talk to some of our main streets, DSLBD in Washington, D.C., and let them know that what was taking place and what our challenges were. And they responded very well. The city council, the mayor, DSLBD, and DMPAID in Washington, D.C., if you notice the news throughout the country, these guys, these agencies responded so quickly that it was shaking our head. As Dionne mentioned earlier, that we had robust retail grants that all of a sudden it was shifted. It's $10,000 grants that were going out anyway. All of a sudden it was shifted so they can take care of bills and take care of the other needs that those businesses face. Next, please. Again, we went to our city council. Next slide, please. We went to our city council and talked to them, and they began to make legislative changes that were really needed. We asked them basically to protect our employees, to look at credit, because we knew that when it comes to small businesses, the first thing you have to do is to make sure that you protect the people in the business credit, because the credit basically is bad because you are late in paying because of COVID-19. All of a sudden you're not credit worthy, and we have to find a way to protect people's credit to make sure their worthiness still exists after this epidemic is over. We also have to look at mortgages, as Dionne mentioned earlier. We have to look at mortgages. How are we going to have mortgages really pay the back end, or delayed mortgages without penalty? The same thing with rents. We have to also make sure that landlords are not kicking businesses out in the middle of this pandemic and give them a chance to rebound. And so we have legislation that was put in place to really help protect these businesses. And at the same time, we had bars. Bars could not have alcohol or wine leaving their store, and we was able to get legislative changes where where bars can actually deliver and people can pick up and take alcohol and wine out of their store. And that really helped rebound quite a few of our businesses. Next, please. And that's with grants. You know, the city, Washington, D.C., the mayor quickly established a $25 million grant fund. But we knew earlier that that was not going to be enough, that we needed more money than that. And I looked at H Street for a good example. We have 4,500 businesses on H Street. And if you gave each business on H Street $1,000, you're looking at $500,000. If you're looking at $10,000, you're looking at close to $6 million. And imagine all of Washington, D.C. Trying to feed off of $25 million. It's just not enough. So we have to be really creative. And we knew that we needed federal money to really make things work. We believe at the time that the city really should have shut down, the country really should have shut down on the economic, some type of economic freeze. We knew back in during the Great Depression, when Hoover was president, and he really didn't handle it well back then, that it took Roosevelt to really do things differently. But what they did, they ended up protecting the larger corporations and the banks, and the small people really didn't make it. They really, went crazy. They lost their businesses. They lost everything that they had worked for so many years. And the same thing happened in 2008 during the economic shutdown, that the larger corporations were taken care of, the smaller businesses were not. The banks were taken care of, but the smaller businesses were not. So we knew that we had to find a way to really take care of small businesses, that we had to stop that flow where the larger corporations are taken care of, and the front line is really sitting back and not taken care of. We have to protect their credit, we have to protect their health, and we have to make sure that we erase their fears and make sure they're secure and make sure they have food to eat. Next. What we did in H Street, most of the businesses were closed. So what we did, we looked at the restaurants and the bars, and we began to put up signs. We had a local printer who printed out grab-and-go signs and curb delivery signs. What we did again, we worked with district government, and we created pickup and delivery zones. On 8th Street, we have 18 pickup and delivery zones that service over 60 businesses along the 8th Street corridor. And these signs were basically put up in those businesses, and they're doing pretty good. They're really able to maintain themselves, they're able to pay some of the bills, pay their employees, and that's really important to pay their employees. And we did a pretty good job with that. We also had the food truck that you see out in the street. They were actually building out their building. They was going from a food truck to a brick and mortar building. And they actually now, we had them to park in front of their building. They have 2 trucks, and one of the trucks that parked in front of their buildings, and they have long lines of customers that they're able to serve. Next. These are the pickup and delivery zones. These are some of the signs that you see in these photos. And as you see, these guys have worked very well and doing very well with the creating the delivery zones where cars can come up, park real quick, pick up the food to go, or make their order and keep going. Next. We also advertise many of our guys in newspapers. We have to do what we can to really help them produce foot traffic. We provide ads for our businesses. We have to deal with floor distancing or social distancing markers and signages. We're doing what we can, and we have to find a way to deep clean and disinfect many of the stores and sidewalks. Next. These are some of the social distancing signs that we have that we laid around some of the bus stops. We had large congregations. We had storefronts that were serving people, and they had large congregations in front of their storefront. We basically put social distancing signs on the ground to really remind people, 1, you had to cover up, 2, that you had to have social distancing to protect your friends and their loved ones. Next. We also have ads. If you see the ads that we have in the paper, we use a local newspaper, and we listed quite a few of our businesses. We listed quite a few of our restaurants along the 8th Street corridor in those ads. And we provided the names and phone numbers of the businesses. We also put this information on our website where they can go on the website and get in contact with these businesses and provide their orders. Next. We also realized that, again, we had the micro grant programs on 8th Street. We had about $20,000 that was set aside for another program, and we ended up creating a micro grant program where we had businesses who were basically not open at all and shut down. What we did with the beauty salons and barbershops, nail salons, tattoo salons, we paid for the renewal of their licenses. This is renewal license time for them. We paid for their renewal of their licenses, and we also paid for every one of their employees who had license renewal for the time at this time. So they are covered, and then we gave a little extra money to help them pay their electric bill or whatever they need to pay on that time with the money that was left over. We also have a program called the Power of 10. You can move on to the next slide. The Power of 10. And this right here is one of the second wave of business responses where we have the mini grant, the letters that we sent out. Next. We also have the Power of 10. The Power of 10, basically, we try to keep our employees hired. We don't want them to go on the unemployment line if they don't have to. We want to keep our businesses operational. We have Kane and McKettle along the 8th Street corridor, 2 restaurants, and we're trying to expand. I think we expanded to about 3 or 4 now. And we have, we raised $10,000 a week. And $10,000 a week will cover 10 full-time employees. And at the same time, it provides 1,000 meals per day directly to the community, to essentials and people who need the most, is our senior citizens and our essential workforce. Next. We feel that this can be done all over the country if you do it right. This is the Power of 10. These are some of the meals they fix, the baggages, and some of the food. Next. One problem we did have is security. Once the city shut down, and you know that your quarters are destitute, no one is traveling the quarter, so your businesses are at risk. And what happened, we began to have some break-ins, and we had to find a way to deal with it. People were smashing and grabbing, breaking glass, and trying to pull ATMs out of stores. But what we did, we contacted our local police department under Commander Kane, who was our first district commander. And we all of a sudden, we started doing neighborhood walks. And then we did with the police department, they started checking every door, pulling doors open. We found out that some of the employees or businesses left their doors open at night. So we had to contact them to make sure they locked the doors. We knew it was by accident, things happened during this pandemic, but we had to make sure they show up and harden their building. At the same time, we decided to have a town hall meeting, a teleconference with the police department. And that teleconference, we had over 110 people who participated in the conference. And we also invited other Main Street programs throughout the city. And with that program, we began to be more security conscious. And afterwards, we ended up catching that the person who was breaking in those buildings a day later, and we locked them up, and we haven't had any break-ins since. We're also looking at security cameras and how to have security cameras in the storefronts. Those, we caught the guy, matter of fact, by security cameras. Those who did have security cameras, we were able to get the footage, and we were able to lock this guy up. And the thing is, we have to find a way in our commercial districts around the country to make sure that we harden these buildings. The hardening of buildings is not the same as we go in and out of buildings every day, but when you're not in your buildings from week by week, people know you are not. They'll take a chance and going in your building from the roof to the back door to the front door, breaking windows or what have you. So we have to find a way to protect these buildings. So we've done pretty well at that. Next. These are the tips that we had that Commander Kane provided, and we got these out in the newsletter and by text by showing the businesses how to harden their buildings and what they should be aware of. And again, they did very well with that. They were very active. We came together like a strong family. And again, we identified those who we thought may be harming our building security-wise. Next. These are some of the buildings that were broken in. I just want to give you a good example how they went through the front doors, how they broke the windows. And let's keep going to next. But these are some of our critical issues that we face. But out of all of that, this is a release. Again, once we caught the guy, we did a news release letting people know that we caught the guy, and we went on the news. And we told folks, if you come on 8th Street, that we are pretty much secure. And if we catch you, we're going to lock you up. We said it as simple as that. We were point blank about our attitude and what we meant. Next. This is the news came out and interviewed one of the businesses. And one good thing that she had, Dionne Wine. Dionne Wine was the wine shop that I mentioned. They couldn't sell wine to go. Everything they had was had to be taken and serviced on the inside. But we had the legislation change with the wine bars along the 8th Street corridor throughout the city. Matter of fact, and now do delivery. So she do delivery part of the day, and she do pickup services another part of the day. And she was able to hold on. Out of 5 staff members, 4 were full-time, 1 was part-time. She held on to all her full-time employees. Next. But one good thing out of that, out of the wine bar, she was awarded during this pandemic, she was awarded the an award for being the most fun wine bar in America. And so we were able to advertise that to help get her more business. So that was a good thing that we got out of this, that she received the award and she's very happy about it. We'll be getting all types of press behind this. Next. This is the magazine, again, showing where she's doing well. Next. We're keeping in contact with our businesses through phones, email, text. I go out because I'm essential, and I go out day to day to talk to our businesses. I try to keep my distancing as far as I can, but at the same time, we have to find a way to take care of our businesses to make sure their needs are met. Because these are the guys, again, on our front line. They're servicing people, they're feeding people, and we want to make sure that they're taken care of. And if anything they need, we really want to be there for them. We're also trying to do whatever we can to create new partnerships during this time and doing different things to create the assistance in the revitalization of our local business. It's easier for us to work with a business and to make sure they're viable, to make sure that they can keep going than to close them down and all of a sudden have to open up a new business. It's easier for us to maintain the business, and we're doing what we can to maintain businesses that we have. We have to take care of our own. Next. Again, we were on news early in March. and we advocated for small businesses when not too many people were at the time. On Real Talk, Real Talk is another media source that's on H Street, and we use this media source many ways to get our word out. And Kwame Brown is a very good friend of H Street, and he did us very well with this show. Next. Again, bail out every day, small businesses.
Thank you, Anwar.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. You have really done some impressive work on H Street. Great takeaways. This is stuff that we can really model our programs after to show how we can respond. Hi, everyone. This is Amanda. I'm here in California, and I'm going to switch to talk a little bit more about what's happening in our distressed communities in crisis. And I really want to appreciate this quote from Michael McAvee he's the president and CEO of Policy Leak. I think he really gives us the charge that we have at this time. Leaders must meet this crisis with the truth about what the nation needs to stabilize, rebuild, and prosper. And there must be an unequivocal commitment made to change the rules of the game to reverse toxic inequality, remove the burdens and barriers of structural racism, and commit to rebuilding a just and fair nation for all. So that is truly the charge. We want this bailout to really reach everyday Americans, small businesses, families facing extended unemployment, organizations fighting to protect the vulnerable. I'm sorry. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, there was a momentary pause.
Okay. Yes, these are some of the things we know that have been ongoing systemic challenges. Access to capital to be major hurdle for small businesses in low to moderate income urban communities, disinvestment in downtowns and commercial districts, homelessness, lack of fresh food choices. As a former executive director of an urban Main Street program in Richmond, I witnessed firsthand how challenging it was for many ambitious entrepreneurs to start a business, to maintain a business, or to grow a business. The crisis has truly crystallized the challenges. And you can see from this chart that minority businesses are financed well below non-minority businesses, 68 to 40%. And these are low risk businesses. So you can see the difference there. Disinvestment in commercial district has historically been a challenge in low income districts. In Richmond, it took nearly 10 years to attract major investors in downtown, even though surrounding cities were seeing huge investment in development projects and incentives. So I think this is the time we must really take this moment to advocate for new policies to address system changes that don't reinforce the status quo. So some of the other key drivers, minority businesses face significant challenges to reopen. Many of you likely participated in the recent Main Street study and may have seen these numbers, but they are startling. 7.5 million small businesses are at the threat of closing as we speak. Again, businesses were already behind the curve in some of these districts, and they're going to suffer more significant challenges to reopen. Those businesses have already been tapping into their personal funds, and many of them, again, as was mentioned earlier, are unbanked or don't have relationships with bankers. So we know that that's going to be a real challenge. And as we look for the new stimulus that's coming out, and we know that the $350 billion was already spent and unfortunately did not reach a lot of our small mom and pop businesses. So we must fight to see that these other funds do reach the businesses who need it most. So this is one of our urban main streets. I spoke earlier, Richmond Main Street. I was former executive director there. These are some of the ongoing challenges specific to COVID-19, loss of jobs and income, Many businesses were not ready to pivot to sell online or remotely. They're seeing big challenges there with the lack of understanding how to access the stimulus. Many of them have language barriers. We're again hopeful that this new package will deal with some of that. They've been helping specifically to lead their businesses to resources. So some of the things that they have done to support their businesses is to start a community resource directory. They developed an online resource directory that is very comprehensive with information on grants, loans, workshops, training, and other resources for small businesses, also for community residents and for other organizations. They were able to quickly apply and receive a grant from Wells Fargo to support digital marketing in downtown businesses across their 7 platforms. They also were one of the first to receive the PPP in the first round and continue to maintain a good relationship with their community bank, Mechanics Bank. So that's really another pointer to us that we have to really make certain that we continue to build relationships with our banking institutions and really encourage all of our businesses to do the same. This is truly the time that we have to rely on relationships. So these are some of the things that the businesses have done there in Richmond to, respond to the crisis. Left side printing, open business shop for local safely banners in storefronts. Despite struggling themselves, they're offering 50 banners free of charge to businesses, working with them to add custom contact on those signs to go in their windows. And also a bike shop, Rich City Rides, is now offering branded face masks. They've sold out on their first release, and I believe they have more now in stock. And another small cafe, Kaiser Richmond, she donated meals to Kaiser despite temporarily closing her restaurant herself. So people have really rallied together to support each other in this time, even though they're struggling themselves. So these are some of the grants for small businesses and nonprofits. The City of Oakland has an emergency grant fund for businesses. They're offering $5K that will cover rent, utilities, workers, and other outstanding debt. Some of you are aware of Facebook and LISC and the small businesses grants that they have available. Also, the East Bay Community Foundation and San Francisco Foundation have emergency rapid release grants available. And just want to mention that, throughout California, there are many efforts underway. There are 26 California Main Street programs. We are building our urban Main Street, but also throughout, we've got Cardiff and Encinitas and Livermore that are doing some excellent work, working together. They have put together a fund. They're raising up to $100,000 to support small businesses. Encinitas with a match from the Harborough Foundation, Leucadia and Encinitas and Cardiff are doing that. So we know that there are folks that are working hard to support our small businesses and to support our main streets. This is a time for all of us to really show up and show that we can work together and build our communities so that we can get through this crisis. And I want to welcome Carolyn Johnson. She is the Executive Director of the Black Cultural Zone. They are new to our Main Street community. I'm so happy to have them participating and have her participating today. There's a lot of excellent work that she's doing in East Oakland, creating hubs throughout the city. And Carolyn, you can take it away. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much. So the Black Cultural Zone was formed in 2014 to address the decimation of Black businesses on our corridors, our large commercial corridors in Oakland. Our purpose is here. We're a grouping of about 20 different organizations and growing who are committed to creating commercial space and commercial hubs and communities where our people can thrive. We are new to Main Street and happy to be here. It's great to hear all of the things that are going on and ideas. Where we stand in Oakland is that we have several cultural hubs in Oakland, in the Black community, the Latinx community, and the Asian community, and we don't necessarily have a Main Street organization that represents any of those cultural groups. As you all may know, California and Oakland in particular has suffered quite a huge amount of displacement, not only of our people and residents, but of our businesses in recent years. And so we're scattered and we're doing our best to organize ourselves. And that scattering really has had an impact on our ability to respond and had an impact on just our resilience. Next slide, please. So just wanted to really reiterate that in this issue of the pandemic, there are communities who already were in tough positions, and this situation makes those positions tougher. Folks tend to have a view of the city of Oakland as one, home of the Black Panthers, home of a lot of cultural diversity, but even when it scored itself on citywide equity, it scored itself only 33 out of 100 in terms of business development, in terms of employment, in terms of the financial health and job quality across the board. It's not doing a good job in terms of equity, and we see that playing out now in the disparate outcomes of health and wellness related to the pandemic. The majority of the cases, next slide, please. The majority of the cases of COVID are found in the flatlands of Oakland, where the Latinx and Black community currently reside. And when I mean majority, I mean majority. And that's due to many things. At-risk health already. Many people who are essential workers who are not able to work from home are people of color. Our frontline healers, not the large hospital systems, are manned by people of color. Lots of residents, because of the crisis in housing, are sharing homes. And so therefore, if there's one person infected, others will be. And 75% of the unhoused community in Oakland are Black people. This is due again to displacement, where many folks who are living in shelters are living very close to where they may have owned a home or lived all of their lives. And so we have an elevated health risk. We have a higher closure rate. For those non-essential businesses that has to close, 95% of most of those are sole proprietors or partnerships with no employees, and those are the businesses that were closed. And those also are the businesses that were relatively shut out of some of the federal funds that are available. We have very limited access to rapid recovery relief programs. As you've heard, a lot of the funds that are listed are no longer available. PPP funds were, we've had banks who have shuffled the PPP loans and put the larger Black or Hispanic businesses to the top. And so what we found in our community as we're doing this assessment is that many of our communities have very limited access to even the rapid response funds that everyone needs. Next slide, please. But we have been moving to create rapid response networks. From an economic perspective, we've put together virtual phone banks, and we've been outreaching with several different coalitions and groups and networks to make sure that we're reaching out to all of the businesses and helping them with navigational support, things like putting together the applications, answering some of the questions, and that's happening as we speak. We're focusing also on behavioral health. This is having traumatic effects not only on the body, but on the mind. And so we've been organizing a behavioral health and wellness network so folks can tap into virtual resources to deal with stress, to deal with just unhealthy behaviors, to deal with some of the rigors of trying to respond with the lack of access to adequate support. We're putting together a media campaign. We're initially tagging this campaign as Operation Mayday. We know Mayday is a distress signal, and we're really calling on everyone to pay attention to what is happening in lower income communities, underrepresented, underprivileged communities in terms of access in terms of overreaching and overarching exposure other than other communities and the impact. And so we have that campaign. We also are launching a Trusted Voices campaign, because we know sometimes that with our community, we have to hear from folks that we trust, and advising folks that, yes, this is true. The pandemic will affect everyone, and you really should wear your mask, and you really should wear your gloves, and you really should wipe down things. And so we're working on that as well. We're also looking to open air markets where we can exchange and provide personal protective equipment. We can apply food and pantry supplies, and we can also give people an opportunity to get out in a safe way. And so that's what's happening on a rapid response basis. One of the good things that has come out of this pandemic is that many of the coalitions that have been working in their own spaces have actually organized themselves and are working together in a way that I've never seen before in the city. And so we're focused also now on post-pandemic planning. We know that there has been a temporary stop to displacement in Oakland as the commercial markets and real estate markets are kind of wondering what's happening. But we know that there are groups that are waiting to continue to do the work of acquiring properties and putting them at elevated prices that no business owner or resident can afford. And so we're looking to organize across Oakland a community fund that will help to take back some of that property to hold on to certain property. We're also looking at long-term mutual aid. The mutual aid that we see now, neighbors helping neighbors, we want to actually make that a permanent thing. How can we create an alternative economy for those who won't have access to cash in the near future, but have skills and things that they can trade and time that they can commit? How can we create a mutual aid network broadly and on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis? Next slide. And so in advocacy and policy, one of the things that we are doing collectively in Oakland is consolidating a list of community needs. There's several different organizations. We're making demands at the city level and at the county level and at the state level and at the federal level. We're elevating those concerns to our elected officials who have all been joining in to support. We're engaging our public with media campaigns and word of mouth campaigns, and we're holding the governments accountable. We've heard of cases where people were denied even the ability to apply for a PPP loan. We're holding people accountable if they didn't really deserve to get the PPP funds. And so we're getting support from our government, but we're also asking them to be accountable for making sure that there's equity, fairness, and justice in how resources are deployed to support us all. But more importantly, to not forget that many communities like ours were in a bad place to begin with in terms of health, which is why we're more likely to be infected with COVID and more likely to succumb to COVID-19. Next slide. I think that might be my last slide. Is that my last slide? Great. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anwar, excuse me, Amanda and Carolyn, for sharing the great work and resources that you guys are, seeing that's happening in your districts. Amanda, as a coordinator, I know that you're seeing many resources and tools that are coming in from the state. I mean, I think of California like a little mini nation itself. So I know you have many examples from both rural as well as urban. Carolyn, please let us know how the mutual aid campaign goes in Oakland. It would be a great resource to share to the larger UrbanMain network. As we think about these communities, many of these communities will rebound by the support of neighbors helping each other, businesses helping each other, and it sometimes won't be the foundations and the corporate partners that we would immediately look to. So these are many things that we need to do in our community ourselves. We really hope that this webinar has shown you all a path of immediate response, managing impact locally, and leading through recovery. This may enforce many things that you are currently doing already, but we really hope that we were able to share some new information that you can implement. So please reach out to these fantastic, amazing speakers. I will look ahead at, just thinking about this from the 4-point approach and looking at it in an urban context of what does recovery look like? We'll be you'll do new ways of doing business. You see a picture of myself without makeup and two of my colleagues from Chicago, and we're really engaging with each other now using Zoom or GoToMeeting when that works. So we're really continuing to shift, our project teams and task forces, versus standing community committees and meeting face to face. virtual Zoom meetings are taking the place of that, and people are able to meet and really discuss things that they want to work out. I heard of a local community in DC, in fact, District Bridges, that talked about their strategic planning process and how they're changing this to treat the strategic planning process to virtual ways of doing business. So that will likely become our new normal, and people will become very comfortable with that. Next slide, please. There will be, partnerships, possibly with public health officials, to set up safe shopping protocols. Think of it like a CDC self-certification. We recently contacted a group by the name of Street Sense, and Street Sense has developed a restaurant relaunch toolkit to really help restaurants as they're thinking about reopening in urban settings. I talked about the Baltimore program and how they are providing assistance to small businesses to really look at redesigning their interiors to ensure that there's outdoor seating so individuals can still practice social distancing and, really ensure that they're practicing public health standards, and virtual gallery tours, but virtual happy hours. I talked about the virtual gallery tour that happened in Baltimore. Again, these will be things that will likely become a new normal. As I indicated earlier, most of the festivals in Illinois, as Anwar noted very well, Chicago, Boston, DC, San Francisco are, the hotspots right now for Corona. And like Carolyn so wisely noted, in Chicago, 30% of our residents are African American. However, 50% have been infected with COVID-19. So we know that people's comfort to just come out and attend festivals will change until a vaccine has been developed. As there's this wonderful event that I'm always looking forward to in Chicago, and it's called the House Music Festival. The House Music Festival generally happens on the 4th of July weekend, and it has immediately been shifted to a virtual festival where individuals will be able to listen to this great music and hear their favorite DJs in a virtual way. We will begin to live in a world like that. Next slide, please. When you think about promotional shifts, I just talked about the virtual event. Virtual happy hours. Van Ness Main Street is hosting a series of virtual happy hours to continue to keep engaging their businesses. Barracks Row Main Street has listed all of their businesses that are open right now. I'm sorry, that's not Barracks Row. That's Rhode Island Main Street. I apologize. Has listed all of their businesses that are open right now in their hours. So really continuing to market those businesses to make certain that they're getting their support of customers, to let them know that they're open. They're open and available for curbside delivery and pickup. So really marketing your local businesses, utilizing online tools, virtual meetups and events. Farmers markets will likely see growth, but again, people will be hesitant to go to these farmers markets. So in Chicago, a group of local farmers were able to come together to develop an online platform to still keep delivering fresh produce to individuals during the time of uncertainty right now. So one, their produce wouldn't go bad, but they were also able to continue to deliver food in areas, as Amanda mentioned, that may not have a grocery store, that may not have access to fresh food. So again, just being adaptive. Next slide. As we look ahead again at these economic vitality shifts, there is a desperate need to shift our mom and pops to online operations. E-commerce is necessary. I ran a program almost 7 years ago, and this was a federally funded broadband technology opportunity program. And the purpose of this program was essentially to get small businesses online. That was a part of one of the components of the Smart Communities program. And today it saddens me that still over 60 or so % of businesses are not online. We are looking at many of these businesses needing to shift very quickly but when they don't know like what they need to shift to, how are we able to help them? Next slide. This is when your roles become so vitally important in your trusted relationships with the businesses that you're serving. So I mentioned the Smart Communities program, and this was an assessment that we created 7 years ago to really go in and understand, like, what is the technological savviness of our businesses that we're working with? Do they have access to the internet right now? Do they know how to use a computer? Are they using a computer? And how often are they using a computer? Do they need particular trainings? So this may not be things that you need to do, but you can definitely connect them to service providers in your community that may be providing online trainings for free. You know, this program that I mentioned was a very generous program where we were able to award 100 businesses a computer, also award them with Cisco equipment to help bolster up their business if they wanted to utilize it. We were also able to, you know, connect them to digital online training programs. And often a lot of these digital online training programs had to happen in the business. We know our business owners are so busy. So how are we able to create webinars and tools for them to access while they're at work or right before they go to work? So this tool, I think, is a very important tool to begin with to make sure that you're assessing the local business technology capacity. We have to start somewhere and understand where they are. Next slide, please. We're 8 minutes over, and I'm so sorry for that. But we really thank you for joining us today. Main Street America and UrbanMain remains committed to you during this crisis. Remember, again, to check our COVID-19 webpage for updates and upcoming webinars. UrbanMain is in the process of establishing an online community on a national Main Street Center online platform called The Point. So you can hear from fantastic people and connect with them, like Anwar and Carolyn. They're just a snippet of the wonderful urban commercial district managers that UrbanMain has touched and worked with. There are so many ideas out there that you guys can really benefit from. So that's something that, you know, is on the way. We're also in the process of creating an article or a publication on a Main Street approach in an urban setting. It is different applying Main Street in an urban setting. And so we will lay that out in a publication, so that can be a great resource for you as well. During this time of calm, we're able to write a bit. Many field service staff are off the road. We will also to make sure that we are featuring our communities and their responses, and they're adaptive. Again, this is not a technical fix. You have to be adaptive in your response to doing, you know, to organizational changes as a result of COVID-19. The normal fix that, you know, we normally would go to, there is a book for that, or there's some type of article for that. There aren't any. So we're going to have to remain flexible and adaptive of how we are changing and quickly responding to the needs of the businesses that we're serving. And then, you know, you've heard a couple of local advocacy examples from both Carolyn as well as Anwar. We will continue to share those as we compile information and as we work with our coordinators to figure out, like, what is the best coordinated effort that we can move forward for advocacy. And with that, you know, thank you again for joining us. We hope that you remain in contact with us. Please visit the UrbanMain website. If you'd like to hear from us, there is a place where you may have already subscribed to hear more information, to get access to our newsletters as well as our webinars. And of course, please continue to visit the COVID-19 webpage for updates. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope you have a pleasant rest of your day. I think we're going to turn it over to questions now, if we have any.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions that are waiting in our queue, and if anyone else has questions that you have, now's a great time to chat them in. I do want to also point out that the recording of this program will be available in about 24 hours on our COVID-19 resource page at Main Street America, so you can come back and view this. Also, the compiled slides and the tech assessment that Dionne mentioned towards the end of the program are both available in the handout section currently. So you could grab those while they're there if you so choose. One question immediately for Anwar. Waiting in our queue for you is, how is H Street raising $10,000 a week? Is this all through donations? Could Mr. Salim talk a bit how they've generated such a volume of donations?
Yeah, these are all donations through a nonprofit organization. The nonprofit organization, donations are made to the organization, and the organization in turn give the money to the restaurants to hire people to do the work.
Excellent. So $10,000 a week is quite a bit. Does that, do you think, reflect maybe the kind of area that you live in? Is that kind of typical giving?
Well, really, we had done a citywide campaign, and I think people feel, because of the urgency and the type of work we are doing, that they can give up money like that and they can write it off in their taxes. So I think it's a good thing. It's a struggle, but we're meeting that goal. The owner of the business, Makedo, started off the first 2 weeks at $10,000 himself.
Wow.
All right.
This question, I think, could be answered by anyone, but could also, I think Anwar touched on this a little bit, and I think everybody kind of sees this role, but what role does public transportation play in the rebound of businesses?
Hey,
Well,
guys, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if people can hear me or not. I'm sorry. So I'm sorry, I'll jump in just to say what I'm seeing at the citywide level. So from Baltimore to Boston, and I'm sorry, Boston, I didn't do a really great job because I couldn't see the slides, but Boston really made a relationship with the Department of Transportation to ease parking restrictions in the front of many of their restaurants, to ensure that people were able to just come in very quickly to do curbside pickup and delivery services. So your Department of Transportation is a very important friend to you. I know that DC Main Street has made a relationship with their Department of Transportation, and Anwar talked about that. The city of Chicago is doing the same thing. So I am seeing that the Department of Transportation step up to really meet the needs of their main streets that they're serving. Anwar, would you like to add more on your relationship in DC?
Well, I guess I used to work, so I know that the Uber companies and some of the other transit companies are asking people to wear masks. They have helped with food delivery. They have helped with deliver food to senior citizens. They've done very well with that. So those who can't get out, the city has given them access to food to deliver. The metro systems, I think now that we have to find a way to encourage people to wear masks, because you're that close proximity and not 6 feet away from people, the distancing is close, but you have to have some type of mask protection. Mm-hmm. We have to assume that everyone is infected to a certain degree. That's the only way we can get. And if everyone is protected, we can do greater good. And at the same time, I think this is a good opportunity, if you have any funds for arts and humanities, to do hire the artists to create masks and to assure that everyone have masks. You know, it don't cost much to create masks and to pay the artists, and at the same time to find a way to employ these small businesses, the printers and the artists, to get masks out in the street, and at the same time you protect the public.
That's an excellent idea, Anwar. Carolyn or Amanda, are there any insights on public transit from California to share?
Carolyn, I don't know.
Yeah, this is CJ. Other than what I know is that there's basically no charges to get on the bus. They want people to enter into the back of the bus, but I don't know, honestly, what they're trying to do around transportation, especially for those with BART. I do know that there are some employers who are going to pay for parking so that their workers do not have to take the bus and the BART currently, but that's all I know.
And I know that they have streamlined services in transportation. So a lot, which has made it challenging, I think, for some of the frontline workers who have to take public transportation. but they are only having certain lines that are open at this time. So that is a challenge, but they are working to make certain that the social distancing is adhered to.
All right, we have one more question waiting here. From Richard, he says, can I successfully raise donations to create a general fund for business grants from donors that usually want a specific project identified and cost determined? So I know both Carolyn and Anwar have done work around this, developing those funds. What do you think about Richard's idea without having specificity there?
I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, you look at people's needs. Everyone has different needs, but you have to make sure that you have enough people, that critical mass, that will make that project work. And is a need really there? So that's what you have to really determine early. And then you have to find your partners to really make it work, and then really promote it. And most of the time, you have to have an incubator, somebody in the beginning to start it off, just like the business owner in Maquetto, and then he brought on to the rest of the other one. You have to have something to get it started. And you know, that's what's needed. So I would recommend that. So you have to think short term and long term.
And this is CJ. I think we are out trying to raise a fund for a buy and hold strategy where we are asking for funds to buy property that may be available on the commercial corridor with not necessarily a particular strategy on its use. And if you don't have a specific use, you definitely have to have the backgrounds and expertise and relationships for folks to trust that you know you will do what you say you're going to do, and have some experience. So if you don't have the actual project, you have to have the folks involved who have the experience to do those kinds of deals.
You know, we led the effort in DC with the legislation and all, with the guy who owned the building of Maquetto, matter of fact, to deal with it was a group called Fundrise, and they spoke at one of the Main Street conferences a few years, I think it was in Detroit, and they did with crowdfunding and all, and they literally work with the community to purchase buildings for specific use, and they have done very well with that. So you may want to get in contact with them.
This is Dionne. I will just add also from Chicago, we've had local aldermen, our local alderman, Matt O'Shea in the Beverly Morgan Park area, created a crowdfunding campaign to immediately start providing support to the businesses that are located in his ward. So I mentioned a crowdfunding campaign called Patronicity. Fundrise is one of them. I mean, you know, there are a number of platforms that are available where you can begin raising funds. I would also just add too, from many of the communities that I've spoken to, and this is, you know, in relation to Richard, they've been very lax on the requirements to support their businesses. They really wanted to see an invoice from the business to ensure, like, if it was marketing support, that they were actually doing the marketing. If it was rent that they were paying, that they actually paid the rent. So, I mean, I think at this point, we're still really trying to figure it out. And so you need to be able to not create additional barriers to businesses that are already, you know, in a frantic state right now, and to make whatever process that you create as easy as possible for them.
That was our last question in, so I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of our attendees for being here with us for the program, and thank you to all of our speakers, Dionne, Amanda, Anwar, CJ. You've all done an excellent job laying this out. And just a final reminder, everyone, that slides are available currently in the handouts if you want to grab them. And if not, the recording will be available by tomorrow on our COVID-19 resources page. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.